I've had a bit of a revelation. Maybe I'm just slow on the go. I don't know, but I've been thinking about it. And I've been thinking about a lot of the issues that we have as a community coming together on DM advice. You have some folks who will talk about basically ditching any and all semblance of game rules in order to further fun or story or epic moments or whatnot. And then you'll have other folks who will want to lean heavily on the rules and try to make the game work from within those mechanical boundaries, whether it ends up being great for a particular story or moment or not. And there's a lot of friction between those two sides. And what I realized is I think there are really two camps of folks who play the game, but we don't often self-identify when we're giving advice to each other. There's one side that looks at the game more or less as a performative experience, as a performance. This is we are telling the story, we are storytelling, we are building up to these moments. We're playing for the performance. If you are coming at the game from this performance side of the spectrum, then of course it becomes obvious you are going to look at the mechanics as something that's great when they help the performance. But if they start to hinder the performance, whatever you think that might be, then of course you're going to ditch them, because what ultimately is of primary importance? It's the performance, not the game. If you come from the other side, where you look at it more like a game, maybe more we could call it as a sport, then the rules become paramount. You don't say in a game, any kind of organized sport, say tennis or basketball or football, that, well, it's convenient for a particular storyline, so we should ditch the rule. Well, it's such a Cinderella story, even though the guy's foot was out of bounds. We're going to call it a touchdown anyway, because that's better for the story. No, the story's going to take a hit, and you know that, and that's just how it happens with sports. I really wanted Morocco to get to the finals and win the World Cup, but they didn't. They didn't get to the finals. It doesn't make for the most epic story to fall short in the semis, but that's how the cookie crumbles. That's sport. If I was writing it as a story for a movie or a play, any kind of performance, I might want to raise that tension and get them all the way to the finals, get them all the way into penalty kicks perhaps, and then maybe they win, maybe they lose. That makes for a much better story. But when we're looking at the game as a sport, we say, hey, that's just the way the cookie crumbles. That's the way the ball bounced out, the foot was on the line, and so on and so forth. And so it is what it is. When you're online and you're looking at advice, or you're just seeing it, maybe you're not even looking for it, you're going to find different people who exist in these different camps giving advice, and so they're talking at cross purposes at each other. Me dealing a lot with kind of the old school play, which I think leans much more heavily on the sports side of the spectrum, is going to give advice of a very different sort than someone who may be on the more performative side, like I think we see a lot more of in, say, 5th edition, in which story is paramount. For them, saying, hey, just whatever the armor class is, change it. Whatever the hit points are, change it. Change it at a whim. Whatever you need to do to make this magic moment is going to be very different from my advice in terms of that same encounter, which might be that, hey, they're going to lose this time, or it's going to be easy for them. So be it. There's always another fight. There's always another battle. So when you're looking at advice, or you're online, you're surfing around and you find advice, try to keep in mind, and I'm certainly going to do this going forward, in terms of what camps folks fall into. They're not always going to say it. Sometimes you won't know until you've actually heard the advice, and then you might think to yourself, okay, they're coming at it from this angle. And once you can make that realization, I think it takes a lot of heat off of maybe going in and trying to write a retort or put a video together to rebut what they're saying, because we're really talking to different audiences. We're talking at looking at the game in different ways. So it's not a matter of, hey, you're right, you're wrong. We're just playing sort of different games, or at least in different modes. And in one mode, that kind of advice is probably very good. If I am trying to make an epic moment, a climactic scene from a film with a very cinematic feel, then yes, I probably need to tweak stuff to make that happen. Whereas if I'm playing it more like, hey, here's the championship game, but guess what? It is what it is, then I'm going to do something very different. Let me know what you think about that. As I'm getting involved in TikTok and other places that I'm sort of new, I'm running up against folks who have different ideas of the game than I do. And it's not even just whether we're playing 5th edition or OSR or some other game, but it's also sort of fundamentally how we approach the experience of playing these role-playing games. And I'm just realizing that a lot of times when I see things differently from somebody else, it's not because I'm right or it's because they're right. It's because we're really looking at the game through different lenses, and those lenses are affecting the sort of things that we think are important and the kind of tools we want to use to get the experiences that we want. Game on. Talk to you later.